Gadi stood at the market entrance, his small hands gripping a wooden tray of granules. The sun was setting over Benin City, but the 10-year-old boy barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the coins in his pocket, counting them again in his mind. Would it be enough? Would Mama be happy today? Well, his heart knew the answer. She never was. The other traders were packing up their wares, but Gadi stayed longer. An older woman selling vegetables said to him, "Small boy, don't you have parents?" The same question he heard almost every day. Gadi smiled politely and said nothing. What Gadi didn't know was that other mothers were different. Gadi thought all mothers took every kobo their child earned and complained it wasn't enough. He thought all mothers dressed up beautifully every morning and left the house while their children walked under the scorching sun. Years ago, when Gadi was only 3, his father left. Living with Sama, his mother, was like drinking poison and pretending it was water. Sama complained about everything, appreciated nothing, and blamed everyone for her problems. One day, Gadi's father simply couldn't breathe anymore. Sama later heard that he left the country. From an early age, she brought a small tree and sent Gadi to the streets. The streets became Gadi's school. He learned to count money before he learned to write his name. He learned to bargain with adults before he learned to play with children his age. While other children his age were still wetting their beds and crying for their mothers, Gadi was already a man in a boy's body. By the time he turned 10, Sama handed the entire business to him. She no longer even pretended to help. Gadi would wake up at dawn, walk to the market, buy goods with money from the previous day's sales, arrange them on his tray, and spend the entire day moving from street to street, from house to house, selling. At the end of each day, he would return home to his mother, hungry and tired. She would be sitting in front of the television, her wrapper loose around her waist, her face relaxed and comfortable. She would stretch out her hand without even looking at him. "My money, please," she would say, and Gadi would pour out every coin, every crumpled naira note into her palm. She would count it slowly, her face gradually forming a frown. "Is this all?" she would snap. "You were out the whole day, and this is all you brought? You are such a weak and lazy child. How can we even feed properly with this little money? I'm suffering because of you." Gadi would stand there, tears rolling down his cheeks, his body shaking. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'll do better tomorrow, I promise." And he meant it. Every single time, he would go to sleep hungry, crying into his thin pillow, promising himself that the next day would be different. But what Gadi didn't understand was that Sama was a bottomless pit. Meanwhile, every morning, Sama would dress up nicely and leave the house, all in a bid to maintain the lie that she works 3 jobs to fend for herself and her son. She would visit a friend's house, gossip for hours, then return home before Gadi got back. One evening, Gadi gathered courage, his heart beating fast as he approached his mother. Mother," he said softly, "please, I want to go to school." It wasn't the first time he was asking, but he wanted to try again as he had been making more money lately. Surely now Mama would say yes, he thought. Sama looked at him as if he had said something foolish. "School?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "In case you don't know, the landlord just increased our house rent though. We barely even have enough to survive and you're here talking about school." She shook her head slowly. See, school is not for you. Just be selling what you're selling and making money for both of us." That night, Gadi cried himself to sleep. His chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a stone on it. Unknown to him, there was no increase in rent. It was just one of his mother's lies. There was a young woman in the market named Sarah. Sarah sold fabrics and jewelry in the market. She had been moved by this small boy who worked harder than grown men. Whenever Gadi passed by, she would call him over, buy him real food that was not the stale bread he usually ate. Sometimes she would buy everything on his tray and pay him double, then tell him to go home and rest. One day, Gadi mentioned Sarah to his mother, but Sama's face immediately darkened. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "The world is a wicked place. Nobody does anything for free. That woman, don't be surprised when she uses your head for rituals. If you like, don't mind your business." Gadi's heart sank. He nodded obediently, but confusion filled his mind. Sarah didn't seem wicked. Sarah seemed like everything good than his mother. But Mama said mothers knows best, so he tried to avoid Sarah's shop. He would take longer routes, walk on the other side of the street. Weeks passed after Sama had crushed his school dreams again. Gadi was walking through the market, his face so sad that even strangers noticed. Sarah saw him from her shop and immediately shouted, "Gadi! Gadi!" Gadi hesitated, remembering his mother's warning, before walking in slowly. In her air-conditioned shop, as the cool air washed over his sweaty skin, she bought him rice and chicken and a bottle of cold Coca-Cola. "Gadi, I haven't seen you in so long. I was worried. Are you okay?" Gadi tried to smile, tried to lie, but children are no good liars. The tears came instead, pouring down his face like a dam had broken. Between sobs, he told her everything. When he finished, she reached across and held his small hand in hers. "Gadi, you know what? Come to my shop very early tomorrow morning. Before you start selling, okay? Can you do that?" Gadi nodded, his heart beating fast. That night, Gadi barely slept. His mother's warning echoed in his head. What if Sarah was truly wicked? What if she wanted to harm him? When dawn broke, Gadi slipped out of the house silently. His mother was still snoring loudly in her room. She didn't hear him leave, and honestly, she wouldn't have cared if she did. In her mind, Gadi leaving early just meant he would sell more and bring more money. Sarah smiled when she saw him, and together they walked into a building with a sign that read, "Bright Future School." Gadi's heart nearly stopped. Sarah spoke to the head teacher, paid money, filled forms, and just like that, Gadi was registered in school. He couldn't believe it. He wrapped his arms around Sarah and hugged her tightly. It was the first hug of his life, and it felt so good. The school was close to Gadi's house, close enough so he wouldn't need transport money. Since Gadi already knew his numbers and letters from children in his neighborhood, he was placed in primary 1. He was the tallest in his class, the oldest even, but he didn't care. He sat in that classroom like he was sitting in heaven. But heaven doesn't last when you still live in hell. Immediately after school, while other children happily rushed back home, Gadi would rush to the streets to hawk his goods to make up for the time spent in school. If his sales were low, Mama would say hurtful things that stayed in his heart like thorns, so he worked twice as hard, selling until the street lights came on. One night, he came home very late, tired and hungry, but happy that he sold everything. He knocked and knocked, yet no answer. He curled up by the door like a homeless puppy, his school bag as a pillow, and slept off. The next morning, his mother opened the door as she was about leaving. Gadi told her about school. He thought maybe she would be surprised, maybe even happy, but Sama just hissed loudly and said, "Please, can I have the money from yesterday?" She took what she wanted from his sales and walked back inside. Years passed like this. Gadi juggling 2 lives, student by day, hawker by evening and night. His body was always tired, but his mind was hungry for knowledge. Then came the day of his secondary school graduation. He woke up that morning and dressed in his school uniform for the last time. His mother was watching television as usual. "Mama, I'm going out," he said. She didn't ask where. She never did. She just waved her hand dismissively, her eyes still on the TV screen. Gadi walked to his school alone. His heart was both heavy and happy at the same time. Heavy because Sarah, the woman who had saved his life, was not there. She had gotten married to a wealthy man, a doctor, and moved abroad. They still spoke on the phone sometimes, and she still sent him money and encouragement, but she couldn't be there physically. And his mother, well, he hadn't even told her about the graduation. Why would he? She had never cared about his education. She didn't even know he was in secondary school. At the presentation of awards, Gadi's name was on repeat. Best in mathematics, best overall student, outstanding academic performance, etc. Then a wealthy man in the audience stood up.